Welcome back. You look good up there. It's okay.
Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. And ever since that day, God breathed into man the breath of life. He has continued to show his love for man and his faith in man with every little baby that's been born. And you and I are one of those people. One of those living beings. One of those human beings that God made and God loves. I hope you know me well enough to know that I would never be crass or disrespectful in any way when I'm in the pulpit. But the title of my sermon today is Thanking God for the Little Things, like the ability to pee.
Amen.
You see, we are God's highest creation. God made all the world, and he made all the animals, and then he made man. And he made us to have dominion over everything else. And as much as we love our animals, and I know some of you think they're little kids, they're not little kids. They're not little kids because God made man above everything. God made man above everything. We are his highest creation. And we need to understand that. And we need to grasp that and understand who we are and what our responsibility is, what God wants from us. I've said to you before that my sermons are born out of my life situations most of the time. Not everyone, but most of them. Preaching professors would call that confessional preaching. Confessing from my life what God has done in my life. Some of you were here in January of 2015 when I preached a sermon after my heart surgery. You know what I talked about? I talked about my heart. And I asked the question, I wonder if when that surgeon was in my heart, working on my heart, had it out in his hands, if he could see any love, if he saw any malice, what did he see in my heart? The truth is that God sees in my heart all the time. And that heart surgery was a big event. It was big. It was the most difficult thing I'd ever gone through. You know what? When I had my heart surgery, I only missed 5 weeks, 4 Sundays. And I was back in the pulpit. So comparatively speaking, that heart surgery was a piece of cake to what I've just been through. Talking about something much smaller today in one way, much more insignificant in so many ways, Yet I have missed 14 weeks. 13 Sundays since I last preached in this pulpit. And those were 14 of the worst weeks of my life. 14 of the most difficult weeks of my life. And yet, 14 of the greatest weeks. April the 15th on Sunday morning, I couldn't get out of bed. So, with the help of my daughter and son-in-law, we went to St. Thomas Midtown, and I was diagnosed with pneumonia, where I stayed in the hospital for 4 days. Came home for 6 days, and on April the 23rd, I had a stroke. Spent a total of 31 days in the hospital. Those little bitty hospital beds aren't very wide. There's a lot of holes in the ceiling in the hospital room, and I can tell you how many blocks there are in that room in St. Thomas Midtown, because I counted them a bunch of times. I first heard the term autonomic nervous system about 7 or 8 years ago when I went to the bathroom one night, and as I turned after I used the bathroom to go back to bed, I just fainted. I collapsed in the bathroom floor. I didn't get dizzy. I didn't have any kind of symptoms. I just hit the floor. Jean came running, and I was okay. I was awake immediately. And several times over the last 4 or 5 years after that, I passed out with no kind of warning. And my doctor explained to me that it was because my autonomic nervous system had been compromised. I think it ought to be called the automatic nervous system. Because it's those things in your body that work automatically that are included in your autonomic nervous system. Like your ability to breathe. You don't think about breathing, you just breathe. Our friend Jeff Gann, who is a very close friend and helps us with Pop, had a brain tumor several years ago, and he had to have surgery for his brain tumor. And the thing that was affected by his brain tumor and all of the surgery and everything, the long-lasting effect is that today Jeff forgets to breathe because his autonomic nervous system has been damaged. He wears a CPAP mask at night, not because he has sleep apnea, but because it helps him keep breathing. And sometimes in the day, Jeff has to make himself breathe again because his autonomic system doesn't work any longer. Your digestive system is part of that autonomic nervous system. It automatically digests your food, and you automatically, unless there are problems, you have a BM every day or every couple of days. And that is a good thing. Because if you couldn't, then you'd be in trouble. There is somebody here today that I didn't know who was going to be here, and his name is Brady. Brady was born. He's still baby Brady to Jean. Always will be. She was there when baby Brady was born, and she was talking just a couple of days ago about Kelsey trying to get her to help Brady to breastfeed. But he refused to breastfeed. And the reason he refused to breastfeed was because he had a problem. He had something called Hirschsprung's disease. And baby Brady, at just a few days old, had to have a colostomy. And he had to have a bag that he wore for a long time. And fortunately, that's been reversed. But his little body, even at just a day or so old, knew that the food couldn't go through. And that was because his autonomic nervous system was compromised. The ability to pee, part of your autonomic nervous system. You don't have to think about it. You just go. You just go. You feel an urge, and you go. Well, my sermon today, the title came from an experience in the hospital after my stroke. I was there for 3 days, then they moved me over to the rehab unit, and an automatic thing that they did when they put you in the rehab unit was that they did a scan of your bladder to see if you were emptying your bladder properly. And the nurse did the scan and she said, "Man, your bladder is full. Don't you need to go?" No, I didn't. And so they asked me to stand up and try to go. And I could. And for 20 plus days, I could not pee. It started out every 6 hours, and then they went to every 4 hours. They had to catheterize me in order to empty my bladder. Now, I won't go into a lot of detail about that, but use your imagination, and yep, that's exactly what it was. No dignity, no fun, didn't hurt. It was just having to do it. Let me tell you, you know you're in trouble when your wife and 4 nurses are standing there watching you try to use the urinal, and they cheer when you get out about 10 drops. When you start back, it's just a very little bit at a time until one day I could finally go. Came home having to be catheterized. But thank God that has returned. And it's returned with a vengeance. When I have to go now, I have to go. So if I have to get up and run out, y'all just wait, I'll be back. Okay? But you learn to thank God for the little things. Like the ability to pee. It's not something that you laugh about. It's something that you realize is a part of that great body that God has given us. And every person in the world has an autonomic nervous system. And that autonomic nervous system works so well that there are very few doctors who know how to treat it. The doctors at St. Thomas Midtown didn't really know what to do. They knew what the problem was. They talked to me about the problem, and we went around in circles trying to decide what medicine we were going to use to make sure that I could start peeing. And the problem that developed was that my blood pressure kept dropping. Your autonomic nervous system, when your blood pressure drops, your heart rate picks up, and it brings your blood pressure back. Mine doesn't anymore. Mine doesn't. I couldn't do my standing up therapy because I kept passing out. Even after I got home, I kept passing out. I couldn't do the therapy. I didn't get the full effect of the therapy. That's why I still have to use the walker, because my balance is so bad, because I couldn't do the therapy. My autonomic nervous system was compromised. And even though every person in the world has an autonomic nervous system, and every one of you here has one, in the United States there are only 5 hospitals in our whole country that have a center for autonomic nerve disorder. And Vanderbilt is one of them. And to show you how God works, when we came home and I kept passing out, and we went back to the emergency room, and the doctor asked us where we wanted to go, to the hospital. We said back to St. Thomas. And then after the doctor walked out, I looked at Gina and I said, baby, I'm not sure I want to go back to St. Thomas. So we were just going in circles. So I said, let's go to Vanderbilt. I asked the doctor if we could go to Vanderbilt, and he said, I doubt it. He said, I'll try, but he said, it's so hard to get in at Vanderbilt, I don't think I can. And then about 15 minutes later, he came back and he gave Gene a big hug and he said, we got it. And we didn't even know that Vanderbilt had an autonomic nervous system center. We didn't even know that. But that's how God works. And they put me on some new medication that I have to get through the pharmacy at Vanderbilt. And today is day 37 since I last passed out.
Amen.
Are you thankful today for that body that God gave you? Are you thankful that God made you and He breathed into you the breath of life? Are you thankful that you can breathe today? That you can go to the potty? That your heart rate goes up? And that you can pee? Are you really, really thankful? Are you aware of how magnificent this old body is? With all of its pain, Miss June. With all of the problems, Richard. With all of the difficulties that we all have. It's so magnificent. It's so great. David, King David, one day was looking at things. And this is what he said. He said, I praise you, O God, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Are you aware that you are fearfully and wonderfully made? That our bodies are such magnificent temples of God? We talk about that, but we fail to realize that in the human sense, that they are magnificent things. And we ought to be grateful for them. Now, how did David know that? There weren't any x-ray machines that he could use to look and see all the framework of our body. There weren't any microscopes that could look and see the living cells. I was talking to my therapist a few days ago, and she talked about that class that she had to take in physical therapy where they dissect a human cadaver. And she remembered cutting into a human heart. And she said she looked in the microscope and there were little hair-like follicles in the human heart that she had never even known were there. And she said, you know what they do? They direct the flow of the blood. And she talked about the magnificence of our body. How did David know? Did he pick up one of those little babies that I talked about that been being born ever since God created man? Did he look at one of those little babies like I looked at my kids when they were born and look at every little fingernail and every little perfect thing that was there? And could he just look at that little body and say, I am magnificently and fearfully and wonderfully made? Is that what he did? Or did you just look at his finger and watch it move? That's pretty magnificent. That's pretty wonderful. Or maybe He just needed to go pee. And when he got through, he felt so good. Isn't that a good feeling? When you really, really need to go. And you can. I ran across a sermon preached by a guy named Reggie Brazel. I have no idea who that is. Pastor at the Christian Hope Church of Christ in Plymouth, North Carolina. And on September the 14th, 2014, he preached this sermon. And he talked about our body that starts out as a tiny little egg, about the size of a dot over an eye. And in that little dot, there is a framework, a blueprint for your life. And in that tiny little egg, there is what determines the color of your eyes, and the color of your hair, and your facial features, your personality, your abilities. All in that tiny little dot that develops into a body that has 206 bones. And did you know that there's one bone in your ear called the stirrup that remains the same size from the day you're born until the day you die? 650 muscles, 590 miles of hair for some of us. 10 vital organs, 20 square feet of skin, 60 trillion cells, 60,000 miles of blood vessels, miles of veins, miles of nerves, an eye that if it were rated like your digital camera is rated at 576 megapixels. An eye that if the earth was flat and you could see it, an eye that could see a candle, a single candle burning for 30 miles. A heart that beats over 3 billion times in the average life. Ear and nose that never stop growing. And did you know that you shed 40 pounds of skin during your lifetime? Thank God, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Have you stopped to thank God for that? We forget to thank God for the little things. One of the things that I want to thank God for more than anything else through all my experience is all the wonderful people in my life. And I would start with this lady. "31 days in the hospital, and she was there every day except for when she was spelled by my sister and my daughter so she could go take care of her parents and just have a day off. Not much of a day off to take care of her parents, but every day with hope. You know what else she did? She wiped my bottom. Thank God for my family. When I got home, my little sister was there for 2 weeks to cook and help with me and do whatever she needed to do. And then when she left, my brother came for 2 weeks. And then when he left, my brother and his wife, my nephew came. He called up Gene and said, "I want to come and take care of Uncle Tim." Said if it hadn't been for him when I was growing up, I would have never got to go anywhere, and I would have never learned to fish and hunt and do all those things that I love to do. And he said, "I'm coming to take care of it." And when he left, my niece from Atlanta and her daughter came just to cook and help take care of me. thank God for my family. I thank God for my church. How beautiful were the things that Caitlin put in our order of service this morning. About us being a little church, but being a big church. About being so thankful for each other. Haven't missed a beat for 14 weeks because of people like Naomi Hughes and Bill Washburn and everybody else here, like Pam Sharp helping set up the church, and Mr. Dick when Bill wasn't here, and on it goes. Thank God for our church. First Baptist Church or wherever that's got 15,000 members today doesn't have anything on us. Don't feel cheated one bit because we only have 30 or 40 here on our best day. I thank God for my church. I missed you so much. I thank God for my friends. Jean posted on Facebook that I was sick and having difficulty, and the multitude of people who responded, and people that I hadn't heard from in years and years and years, and they wrote the sweetest things. One person that used to be she was the minister of music's wife at one of my churches, and she said, "I'm praying so much for one of my greatest spiritual mentors." Rick, what's his name? Bennett. Sorry. Rick Bennett posted something, and a lady who was a member of my church when I was a youth minister in Mississippi somehow saw that and responded to Rick's post. He wrote a 2-paragraph statement about what it meant to her that I was her children's youth minister and what a difference it made in their lives. Hadn't heard of her in 35 years since I left that church. Friends. Yesterday on Jean's Facebook page, I saw that one of the guys that was the chairman of the pulpit committee who called me to be pastor at Monticello Baptist Church after I had been the youth minister for 13 years. A guy who stuck his neck on the line to move this youth minister up to be the pastor. It was his birthday, so I called him yesterday. You know what was so amazing? Been 35 years since I was there, and I remembered his telephone number. Dialed it up, and he answered, and I said, "This is a voice from your past." And he said, "I recognize that voice." And he said, "I want to assure you that over the last 14 weeks, every Sunday in our Sunday school class, we have had a Tim Rayborn report before we ever started." That was 35 years ago when I left that church. I'm grateful for my friends. I'm grateful for caregivers. I never thought I would be as grateful for anybody as I was a guy named Dr. Wilcox, who cut into my chest and took out my heart and worked on it, put it back together, and put it back in my chest. But through this 14 weeks, I realized that he didn't have anything on a lot of other people. Like a little young lady who came in every day at Baptist Hospital and gave me a bath. And she did it with such dignity. She never once made me feel uncomfortable. she had a gift of ministry to other people by washing their body. At Vanderbilt, I'd been there 3 days. They hadn't given me a bath. And I asked them if I could have one. They said, "Oh, you want a bath?" I mean, yeah, after 3 days, I did. I was better than myself. And you know what? 2 ladies came in to bathe me. And they bathed me everywhere except my private parts. And I was struggling, and one of them noticed that and said, "Can I wash your bottom?" And I said, "If you don't mind." And with a smile, she said, "I'd be glad to." And I'm just as grateful for that young lady as I was for Dr. Wilcox. Because she found her ministry. She found her way to take care of a 69-year-old man who couldn't take care of himself. With such a smile, with such pleasure, with such dignity. I'm grateful for those caregivers. You see, there are so many things that we have, folks, for which to be thankful. Thought about one of those this week being our mistakes. Most of us have made a few mistakes in our lives, and most of us have laughed at them later. Because a lot of the mistakes that we make are mistakes that happen over things that don't really matter. And we've had some of our best lives at ourselves. My dear wife, Jean, and her sweet friend, Mary, went shopping a couple of weeks ago. And they got in the car to go from Green Hills Mall to the French shop on West End Avenue. And they poked in their GPS and it said that it was 7 minutes away. And they got there an hour and a half later. And you know what Jean said about that? She said, "We laughed and we laughed and we laughed. We laughed and we laughed and we laughed." Jean doesn't cook a lot. And one of the things she cooked one time was a chocolate pie. You know what happened to it? She dumped it out on the floor. And you know what she did? She got her a spoon and sat down and ate.
All right.
You know how much she's laughed about that? We need to learn to laugh at our mistakes. We need to learn to not take life so seriously. We need to learn to be thankful for the little things in this magnificent body that God has given us. We need to learn how to live and to enjoy life and to have fun. Some of you know that in January, Dave and Eve and Jean and I went on a trip to Mexico. We stayed at an all-inclusive resort, and we really didn't do a lot. We stayed there most of the time and just ate and slept and ate and slept and slept and ate. But you know, when we came home, when we got on the plane, you know what Jean said I've enjoyed the most about this vacation? She said, all the laughter. And if you know anything about Dave Bowers, you know that if you're around him, you're going to laugh. Take a vacation with them. It's worth paying their way just to get to laugh. Please listen to me when I say this. Life is too uncertain not to live it with all the gusto we can.
Amen.
Life is too uncertain not to realize what we have in this magnificent body that King David said is fearfully and wonderfully made. People in this world are too precious for us not to grasp everything that God put into us when He breathed into us the breath of life and we became a living being. Don't waste it. Don't waste a single minute of it. Don't wait if you've never received Christ as your Savior. Accept Him today. Let Him come in and cleanse you and make you a new person and give you all the joy that should be yours as a child of God. God loved this old body that's yours and mine so much that He sent His Son into the world to die that we might let that body be redeemed and live and serve and maybe even wipe some people's bottom because we're not too good to do that. Life is uncertain. Just this week in our life, we know about Aunt Nellie being buried yesterday. What a beautiful story. 101 years old. Couldn't ask for much more. But also this week, on Tuesday, I think it was, Joe and Sandy Draper, their daughter-in-law, or their, not even their daughter-in-law, their son's girlfriend, wrote about their little baby that was to be born in a few weeks. But the little baby died in the womb and they induced labor, and they talked about the beautiful little 2-pound baby with blonde hair that was so perfectly formed that didn't even get to see life. And then later in the week, our housekeeper, Dottie Sue, got news in the morning that her daughter Jane, who was 33, had died in the night with an aneurysm. That's just 1 week in our life, in the most personal of ways. We understand that life is uncertain. It may not be very theological. It may not be very dignified. But today, I want to encourage you to learn how to be thankful for the little things in life. And I want to close with a closing that my daughter wrote for me this morning when she sent me a text. And she didn't know that she was writing the conclusion of my sermon, but she did. And up at the top is a picture of me on the hospital bed. That was 12 weeks ago yesterday, with my little granddaughter laying on the bed with her doctor kit, taking care of Pap. Get me started on the right direction so that I'd be well. And Ricky wrote, 2 months ago, actually it was 12 weeks ago yesterday, you were in the hospital bed, not able to go to the bathroom on your own, not able to sit up on your own, not sure if you would ever be able to walk again, and definitely not sure that you would preach again. God answered all our prayers and led you to where you are today. You're able to walk, to potty, and today preach. I will be praying to you today as you speak about how great our God is and how thankful we are for the little things. And I add my addendum, like the ability to peek. How grateful we are to you, O God, and how magnificent is your name in all the earth. And how grateful we are to you for all those little things that you've given us in this life. For the big things too, like this body that we have that's so fearfully and wonderfully made. But also, God, like the little things that we have, like laughing at ourselves. Let us today be thankful. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.